It is 10 years since I Let You Go published. I can't really believe it, but it's really amazing to be here to celebrate that anniversary with some really special readers. Thank you all for coming. So what do you want to know? You can basically ask anything. I might not answer it, but you can ask.
So for me, this book, I can remember exactly where I was when I was reading it and I got to that midpoint twist. Can you remember where you were when you came up with that idea?
Oh, that's such a good question. And do you know what? In 10 years of being asked about I Let You Go, I've never been asked that.
So it's done.
I was in my mother-in-law's conservatory, and she had taken all three of my children off to do something like maybe a walk in the park or something. And she'd sat me down with a magazine and made me relax. And I don't do relaxing. And so I hadn't looked at the magazine, but I had a bit of paper, and I still have this bit of paper. And I started writing what had kind of come as a bit of a vision about this woman who was writing messages in the sand and why she was there. And so it was in that moment that I came up with this, and I don't want to spoil things for people who haven't read it yet. But I came up with the twist, and then for quite a long time didn't do anything with it because I didn't really know how to write that sort of book, and I didn't know what a psychological thriller was, because there have been psychological thrillers around forever, but I think it's only really been in the last 10 years that we've seen this huge surge, haven't we, of this sort of female-led psychological suspense. So I hadn't read lots of them. And then I read a Sophie Hannah book called Little Face. And it just something switched inside me because I realised you could write a police procedural, but also have a female protagonist telling her sort of emotional story. So I started writing it.
When you finished your book, when you finished writing it, did you know then you had something really special?
No, I absolutely didn't. I knew that I had a really good twist. I had a couple of good characters. I had some emotional depth, but I also knew it was a big, big, hot mess. I just didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to write a book. And I was very, very lucky that the person who then became my agent could see something in it, and that the person who would become my editor saw enough in it, even though it needed so much work, to say yes to it, and to help me shape it. And I really learned how to be a writer during the course of working on I Let You Go. I'm trying to think if I've had that feeling since. I've definitely had it about elements in books, so twists, or, at the end of Hostage, for example. I know you're a fan of Hostage. When I wrote the end of that, I had a little kind of, I know that's really good. But generally speaking, by the time I get to the end of the book, I'm not sick of it, but I have had enough. Now I'm like, okay, please take this book away now, because I've spent so many months immersed in it. And with I Let You Go, I remember becoming a bit blind to it. So my editor and I had been through so many rounds of this book. We did, I wrote it 8 times, and a lot of those versions were substantially different to the ones before. And I remember saying to her, I just think the twist is really obvious. Because I'd read it so many times. And she said, well, I'm sure it's not, but I'm kind of a bit blind to it as well. So she sent it to a few people within the publishers. And then we sent it to Mark Billingham and Peter James. And I got an email from Mark Billingham saying, I'm so jealous I didn't think of that. And I was like, that's it. It worked. Yeah.
Have you had a favourite book to write, Claire, out of because obviously you're a few years on now and you've had lots of books. Has there been one that stuck with you in terms of
I find that quite hard to answer, because the book that I love the most is the one that I'm writing at this particular moment, to the exclusion of anything else. Often I prefer that book to, real life, to friends, to family, everything. But looking back, I sort of like them for different reasons. I Let You Go will always be, the OG. It's the book that changed my life. It's the book everyone loves. And so that makes me love it. I don't think the process of writing it was enjoyable because it was so difficult and I just didn't know what I was doing and it was such a steep learning curve. I really enjoyed writing Hostage because it's a slightly different book to my others. So my first 3 books were sort of domestic suspense. Hostage, although it still has that element of the domestic setting, it's obviously the whole thing set on an aeroplane. It's a 20-hour non-stop flight. It's quite high paced. It's almost more action thriller than it is psychological suspense. And then more recently, the Fionn books, just because I love Fionn so much, and there's a little bit of me.
I was going to ask you that question. Is there anybody that you based Fionn on? Is it yourself or
So, I mean,
is it people you know?
Fionn is a nightmare, isn't she? I mean, you couldn't work with her. I certainly couldn't live with her. Yeah, she's pretty much me. I think she is me when I joined the police. I mean, I wasn't a rule breaker actually at all, and certainly not to the point where I would get myself thrown out of the job or possibly arrested, when she definitely sails a bit close to the wind there. But I think I had the same chip on my shoulder that she has. I was as assertive and independent and, a bit bolshy. And so definitely all of that comes from me. But generally I'm better at communicating than she is. But so I've really loved writing her books because she's so real to me and because I love Wales so much and North Wales in particular. And it feels very lovely that I Let You Go was set in South Wales and The Last Party and A Game of Lies. And of course, the third book in Fionn's series are set in North Wales. So I've come full circle, I suppose, in the last 10 years.
So you probably can't tell us, but is Fionn and Leo going to get together?
I think I can tell you. Like, I don't want to spoil things, but Fionn and Leo are meant to be together, aren't they? And I think we know that from the minute we meet them. Instantly, Fionn and Leo meeting each other in The Last Party is probably my favourite scene that I've ever written, just because I just love the idea of them meeting with a bang, as it were. So yeah, they're meant to be together, and yes, we will see them very much together in other people's houses. Literally, actually.
That's one thing I love about your books, though, is your sense of place that you create when you're writing. I feel like I'm transported to those places, and I'm not familiar with the area, but I can totally picture it.
And this is why we read, isn't it?
Yeah.
To put ourselves in those different worlds, whether it's to walk in a character's shoes or whether it's to visit a different part of the world. We want to feel like we're absolutely living it. Yeah, and it's really important to me when I'm writing that I have that level of authenticity, whether I'm writing about something I know really well, like a police investigation, or a part of the world that I've not been to at all. I'll always make sure I do my research. So I wrote a book that is partially set in Chicago, a book called After the End, which is my family drama, not a crime novel. And I knew that one character was going to go back to Chicago, where he was from. But I did all my research, first of all, online. So I used Google Maps and I walked down Street View. I found this particular house that his family had lived in, and I found the bar that he was going to go to. And I'd done all this research and wrote it into my first draft. And then I went to Chicago for 5 days on my own on a research trip, and went to that bar and walked down the street and looked at his house. And it was so incredibly real to me that I genuinely expected to look up and see Max walking towards me. Like, I went into the bar and looked around to find him at the table. I need to know as a writer that I feel as though what I'm writing is real, because then I know that you guys will feel it as well.
Claire, what are the best and worst bits of being a professional author now that you've been doing it for a few years?
The best bit about being a professional author is meeting you guys. And I know that sounds like a line, but it really is. And I the reason I know that for certain is that during the pandemic, I found it really hard to write, because so much of my motivation for writing books is getting out and talking to readers and hearing your feedback and being able to share in the sort of bookish excitement with you. And when I couldn't have that, it was like, more than half the job had been torn away from me, and it became really, really difficult. So I think that is the best bit. And also being paid to wear my pajamas and make stuff up. I mean, that's, a pretty good perk. I couldn't do that in the police. Definitely, you couldn't make things up, and definitely not in your pajamas. The worst bits, there's quite a lot of pressure to write another bestseller. That's quite...
That's better than the last.
Yes. So writing something that's better than the last, writing something that is similar enough that you guys know you're getting more of the same, but is also completely different, so that you're getting something fresh. I think being a writer for me, is such an all-encompassing thing. It's my stories are in my head all the time. And if I'm not thinking about the stories, I'm thinking about how I'm going to connect with readers, and what I might write in my newsletter, and what I'll put on social media, and just my entire world is this. And that sometimes can be quite exhausting. I suspect it's also quite exhausting to live with. So, kudos to my family.
Who would you like to be Fiona then? Have you got somebody in mind?
Oh, that's a great question.
Fiona?
I am really bad at remembering people's names. Yeah, I'm one of those people who goes, she was in that thing with him with the nose. Yeah. Alexandra Burke is a really brilliant Welsh actress who I really like. But no, I don't have a clear
Would you
idea.
like it in Welsh? Or?
I would. I'd so with The Last Party, I would love it to be a properly bilingual production, so that the characters who speak Welsh at home are speaking Welsh, and the ones that speak English. And that's partly because that's how the book is sort of written. There are bits of Welsh in it. It's because that's very much how life is in North Wales. So, my children, I was driving one of my children home from a party a few months ago, and their conversations in the back switched between English and Welsh just, over the course of the half-hour journey. They just sort of segued. And I was in the gym this morning, and I heard someone counting his reps, and he counted in Welsh up to 8 and then said 9, 10. And so that kind of bilingualism I love about Wales. So that's how I'd love a production to be. And it also really shows people in the rest of the UK how Welsh exists as a living language, not as something that's just protected, not as something that is only spoken on farms.
Yeah, it's not a dying language.
It's absolutely, it's a growing language. Yeah. And although it's brilliant that we have a lot of Welsh language productions just on S4C, which is the Welsh BBC arm, actually that's not helpful in getting the language out to the rest of the UK. So yeah, I'd love a bilingual production.
That would be incredible to help, because Welsh is such an important part of our identity living in Wales. So to help make that more mainstream in something as great as, your books help bring that to life. And let's hope there is a production, that would be fantastic.
It would be fun.
It would.
It's been really lovely actually to have, to know that the Welsh in the books, it has been taken outside of Wales. So not just in the UK, but also, I pick up a copy of my Norwegian translation, and it's Norwegian and then a line of Welsh. And I think this is really cool. That's exposing people in other countries to the fact that this is a living language.
I don't think people realise as well how close, like you say, it is to the Welsh language. There's people only 10 minutes up the road who don't learn English until they're 11.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is literally only 2 minutes down the road. And I think that the Fionn books help that, because it shows how close it is, with it being Cheshire police department helping the Welsh, it is actually only over the border, only
Yes,
street away.
I think Fionn would definitely tell you that it's Fionn and North Wales Police helping Cheshire.
Well, yeah. Definitely.
She'd get very cross. Other People's Houses is available to order now.